I want to start this morning by going back to that passage, the end of the passage that Ralph read a little bit ago, beginning in verse 27. And, many parts of the book of Isaiah are this way, that they're just so majestic that as a preacher, sometimes you want to step out of their way and just let them come full force at each of us so we can hear the majesty, the power of these words and what God is conveying to us through this servant, Isaiah. And so in Isaiah 40, verse 27, it says, "Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel?" We might rightly read into that in our own minds. Why do you say, O Christian? Why do you say, O church, we are the Israel of God? My way is hidden from the Lord. Why would you say that? And my right is disregarded by my God. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Amen. I've been hearing good things about the Ladies' Day yesterday, how encouraging that was for those who were there. The focus of the day was "Fill My Cup" as a theme, and I got a chance to get a little sneak peek at Amy's notes and all the good stuff that she shared, and so I didn't want to step on any of that or repeat it, but I wanted to find a way to support that idea of filling my cup and dealing with the things that drain us while talking about something different. And I know Amy focused a lot on what real biblical rest is and some of the Bible's teaching on that. And this will go well with that, I hope, as we think about that passage we just read. And as we read that passage, you might have noticed some keywords. Sometimes the best way to find out what a passage is about is by seeing what words are they repeating. What words kind of pull the ideas together? Are there any themes, any synonyms that are coming together? And we saw these words, faint and weary, 7 times in those 4 verses. Faint and weary. What does it mean to you to be weary? You might think of it at first like, when you're tired and you used up your energy like a day's work. But as we read this, I think you can start to see, and hopefully you'll notice, that this is a passage about more than just getting a good day's work in and coming home and, I got a lot done, I'm tired, going to get a good night's sleep tonight. Work can be invigorating too sometimes. It can be even restorative, even though it's taking our energy. But there's something else that has to do with weariness, to be weary. And so consider what makes you weary, Consider the way that life can grind you down, can knock you around like you're, a loose nut or screw knocking around an engine or something, just getting beaten up. The troubles and the difficulties, the challenges and the heartaches, all the things that come at us, along with that pressing on daily grind, if we lose our way and forget the meaning of it all, can make us weary. But then there are these other key words: power, strength, and might. One of my daughters, Nadia, has the Hebrew word for strength that's used here. This is why one of the reasons we loved it is because it's in this passage, is her middle name. It's the Hebrew word Ozma. Ozma, strength from God. Different kind of strength than what you get by eating your Wheaties. This is a different kind of strength altogether. And then there's this word exhausted and this word renew. We will be exhausted, but we will need to be renewed. So this is the problem. This is something we're going to see in this text that is restorative. Now, back before kids, Adrian and I would take these boondoggle adventures, these road trips that didn't have much purpose to them at all, like going to Catalina Island to watch a movie at a cool movie theater, or going, different parts of the country. One of them we did was we went to the Monument Valley to watch a movie on a big screen that someone was projecting out in the open area of that beautiful landscape, a movie that was shot there. It was a Western, John Wayne Western called The Searchers. As we went and we watched this, and it was a great, great weekend, except as we're driving, we realized a couple of things. First of all, I slowly watched as my fuel tank slowly started to creep down. And as I was watching that, I was watching for exits, as you do, for service stations. Only I didn't realize we would be driving through Navajo Nation Indian reservation that didn't have service stations like I would expect. I mean, it was just miles and miles of nothing but freeway. And so we were at it, and at some point you stop like, hey, I'll catch the next gas station, and you start just praying, Lord, let there be something. How are you going to get us through, get us to the next place? And Adrian and I both remember that as she said it, I was the calm one that day. I was really anxious, and she was like, it'll be okay. We're praying about it. And eventually, as we got really close, I mean, it felt like we were on E forever, but eventually, as we got close, we found a place to fuel up and everything was okay. But maybe you have felt at times in your life like you have been on E for so long. Like you are just in your life running on empty. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. If you've ever been at that place where you got nothing. And it's not just that you're tired. It's that you are holding on emotionally, spiritually. Every part of you is like all the juice has been squeezed out of this orange, and there's nothing but a little bit of pulp and a rind there. And so what this passage tells us is to renew our strength. And it tells us how, because renewing our strength, as this passage tells us, is conditional. It's not for everybody. Not everybody is going to just automatically have their strength renewed. It is for those who wait on the Lord. So that leads to some questions about what is he talking about? How do I wait on the Lord? What does that have to do with renewal? And the New Testament talks about this idea, and we find the idea of renewal throughout the Scriptures, but this is a powerful place where we start to see this. So let's put this into context. There in the first verse of our text, verse 27, Israel, the nation of Judah at this time, is asking or stating this belief, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God. God doesn't notice what's going on with me. That must be it, right? It's like he doesn't, maybe he notices, but he's disregarding. He doesn't even care. Maybe there's, what is going on? Now, where are we in the story here? I'm going to give you a broad outline of Isaiah as we go, but as we get to chapter 40, in chapter 39, the first half of the book, part one of the book, has closed with this prophecy that everything that Hezekiah knows, that the princes and all the riches of Judah are going to be carried away to Babylon. And here we get to chapter 40, and as we read on, we start to see that Isaiah seems to be talking not to the people of his own time, but as a main focal point, starting in chapter 40 all the way through 66, he's talking to the exiles in Babylon 150 years or so later, that he has a message now for them, and that message ultimately is about a greater exile, a greater deliverance or exodus that's coming, that the New Testament is all about, is what plays out as we start to see the pictures of Jesus, the suffering servant, who is ultimately going to deliver them. But here they find themselves in exile, and they have some questions, and they have some issues. They have seen horrors. The book of Lamentations is all about the horrors that Jeremiah saw as he watched the fall of Jerusalem. And at the center of that book, the heart of the book, in the very middle of it, in chapter 3, is a call to wait on the Lord. Jeremiah was living through it, and he said the same charge as Isaiah says to those people a century earlier. Wait on the Lord. I mean, they have seen not only terrible things, but they've seen the promises of God start to look iffy. Like, how is it that the land promise is fulfilled when we're carried away? How is it that the Davidic covenant, whenever the Davidic king is taken away, where is the promise? What is going to happen? By the rivers of Babylon, I sat down and wept, the psalmist says. They were troubled. And you know what? It wasn't going to be resolved for a while. A long while. And so we find this context where they're feeling disregarded. And there's the question that Job asked, the question that sufferers ask, the question that those who are weary ask. Why? And God's servants ask it of God. Throughout the Psalms you see this question. How long? What's happening? What's going on? What does it mean? And there might seem to be two possibilities in their heads as we read Isaiah here. Maybe God just doesn't care. Maybe because of how bad we are, we have messed it up. And he is punishing us, and he has just said, never mind, write them off. Does God care? And so in verses 1 to 11 of chapter 40, he shows, yeah, you bet I care. But maybe he's just not able to do something. Maybe he's just, like some people believe today, just so distant that he doesn't really get involved. He's not an interventionalist type of God. Or maybe the Babylonians are right and their God is more powerful than ours. Maybe we have this all wrong. What is going on? Well, we see in 12 to 26 that no, God is mighty to save. And so in verses 1 to 2, he starts this beautiful section, the second half of the book, with the words twice, comfort, comfort my people. He has not had a tone of comfort up to this point. He has been beating them up because they were wrong. But now he wants to reassure them. And he says, I'm pardoning you. A double pardon. He's going to eventually say the real way that this pardon is paid for when we get to these stories of the suffering servant, and especially chapter 53. But this is the beginning of that story, his comfort and pardon. And he says, he's coming. God is coming. And there's this picture of making a highway like a king would travel across the wilderness, and you raise up a highway across the wilderness for him to travel across. That's why they would make roads. They would make the king's highway, and they would raise it up, and he would come and march in, and there's a highway coming across the desert to you in Babylon. Only there's more to that picture. God is coming, and when we get to the New Testament, we see that this is a prophecy not just of the deliverance from Babylon. This is a bigger deliverance. God is coming. Jesus is coming to deliver his people, and John the Baptist is going to make the way for the Lord. They wouldn't get all of that at that time, but God is coming to rescue you. He does care. And you can count on his promises. His word doesn't fade away. It's not like grass withering away. It is solid. If God said it, it's true. And he says, I'm going to shepherd my flock, and you can count on that. I'm going to carry you. I'm just going to put you on my back and take you with me. He cares about his people. He always has cared about his people. And not only that, he has power over the universe. Everything is made. As Jeff talked about, everything that's made, it's like the nations are a drop in a bucket. They're nothing. He calls the stars like pet dogs that he names, and they show up. He makes everything. He is over everything. And he's not just over the universe, he's over human history. He's over the kings and the nations, and this one rises up and this one comes down. His hand is involved in the world and in their affairs. He does care. Our God is able. And that leads us to the statement about who he is. And there's a lot of questions, and they're rhetorical questions. Don't you get it? Have you somehow missed this? Did you not hear? God is God. Sometimes we just need reminded of this. It's just a simple truth. There's that verse in the Psalms. Be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we just need to remember, God, you're God. And if you're God, and I know you're God, I know everything that you are all wise and all powerful and all just and all loving. And you hear me and you know me. And I can drop my guard and change how I'm viewing everything that's happening that had me so worked up. God is God. And you know what? He never runs out. God is everlasting, creator, unsearchable. Look at how limitless all of this is. He doesn't faint or grow weary. He's the source. He is not contingent. A couple years ago, December 5th, 2022, something that some people think was a big deal happened. The nuclear fusion breakthrough is how Forbes magazine described it in the headline. Nuclear fusion breakthrough, the future of clean, limitless energy. And they said that scientists were able to put in to a nuclear fusion reaction less than they got out. They got out more than they put into it. Energy. A free lunch, something for nothing. You put in something and you get even more than you. This is a big deal if that actually works itself out. And they said that they thought that scientists were saying that we might be 4 decades away from 100% clean, limitless energy as we are on this quest to unlock the power of the sun on Earth. And what that made me think of is the power of the sun that Superman is powered by in the myth. I'm not saying that that's a myth. That's not science-y, but I'm just saying we start to think, using this as a sermon illustration, that we can unlock the power of the sun and have all of this limitless power. But here's the deal. You're limited. You're not Superman. You're not Supergirl. You are going to run out if you're running on your own power. God is the one limitless power source. Everything that is contingent on God ising. Because he is, I am, the great I am, everything has been made. Everything continues to exist until he says, I don't want it to anymore. God gives power to the faint. That's not just something he does. It is inherent in who he is. It is central to his being. He is the source. Everything here, to use Isaiah's word, faints. I know that if you're anything like me, you will be checking I forgot to charge my phone. I'm down to 3% battery life. Phone anxiety is real. Phone battery anxiety. Well, you know what? You need charge too. Everything needs power. And guess what else faints? The sun. The sun is dying. Everything that not for a long time. Don't worry. It's not going to make any news anytime soon. But if the Lord lets the world keep turning long enough, everything grows faint. But God does not. He gives power to the faint. And then he says in verse 30, even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. Let's look at some of these words a little bit. So this word for youths this word for faint means failure through loss of inherent strength. This is from Mateer, Alec Mateer's work on this. Failure through loss of inherent strength. You don't have enough inherent strength to keep going. And weary, exhaustion because of the hardness of life. This is looking at the Hebrew words and what they mean. The hardness of life is wearing you down. Can you relate ever? Then he talks about the youths. The youths are self-explanatory, those in the prime of their life, right? But then this word, young men, has a special meaning. It comes from the word for choose, and it has this idea of those picked out for bodily prowess. Like those who are chosen because you're so strong. Not only are you young, but here's the elite athletes. Here's the people who are just like, this is the top of the line. But they too will be exhausted so much that they fall over. And this word for exhaustion has to do with tottering and near collapse from fatigue. It made me, as I was thinking about this idea of waiting for the Lord, it made me think of an illustration from the Olympics. And I thought I had a picture in here, but do you remember when they had, those of you who watched the Olympics, you guys know I loved it, they had the 100-meter. And this is the race where we decide the fastest man on earth and the fastest woman on earth. So all the men are running, and Noah Lyle's an American, USA, wins the 100-meter. And then a couple days later, his strongest event is the 200-meter, but he didn't run it. In fact, you saw him in heats on his hands and knees. Looked like he was falling apart. And he found out later he had COVID-19. Fastest, strongest, best of that we have. The elite athletes will fall exhausted. We're all frail. We're all human. We all need more than we have. But they who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. So what does it mean to wait for the Lord? Back in chapter 33, I'm going to try to keep the theme of waiting on the Lord is throughout the Old Testament and throughout the New Testament. But I'm going to try to mostly focus in Isaiah here to help us understand this. So there's a waiting prayer, I might call it, in Isaiah 33, verse 2, when Isaiah prays, "O Lord, be gracious to us. We wait for you. be our arm every morning, our salvation in the time of trouble. When do you need to wait? Will you be waiting when you're at home with God in eternity, enjoying eternal life? Will you need to wait on the Lord? You got it. Don't need to wait then. When you need to wait is in the time of trouble. Trouble is time-bound, separated from God's answer by time. Here's what I mean. Okay, so I brought a calendar up here. Fort Wayne Children's Zoo calendar. And so today is the 29th. Now let's say today a problem appeared that you don't know how to deal with. I mean, it is something big. It's your family. It's your health. It's, are you going to be able to find a place to live? It's a big deal thing. Or maybe it's a question. Maybe it's a crisis of faith. Maybe something big is happening. And now if at the same moment that it comes up, it also is answered and resolved, you don't have to wait. In fact, it doesn't require anything. It actually can't coexist. The problem and the solution, if they're overlapping each other, then that's not a problem. That it doesn't exist, you know. So if you think of it showing up now, there's this problem, and you pray about it, and the church is praying about it, and you're working through it, and nothing comes. There you are into October, and nothing comes, and you don't know what it's about, and you're hanging on, but you don't know how much longer you can hang on. And it goes weeks, and it goes months, and here you are, and maybe in November, maybe in December, you start to see a resolution. Maybe it's not the answer that you were praying for, maybe it's not what but something is happening. And you can feel the sense that this is being resolved. Your prayers are being answered. Well, what was happening in between those times? If you stretch that problem and resolution out, if you stretch out the time of trouble and the time of deliverance out, what's in between is time, but what is in between also, for a Christian, needs to be faith. And faith, over time, through the time of trouble, is waiting on the Lord. Holding on to faith across that time. That's the easiest way I know how to explain what this is. Waiting on the Lord has to do with all the things that faith means. Here is how one of my favorite commentators on Isaiah defined it and explained it, John Oswald. He said, this is a little bit of a long quote, but stick with me. This is really powerful, I think. Waiting on the Lord means complete dependence on God and a willingness to allow Him to decide the terms. Are you willing to let God decide what the answer is, what the terms are, what solution looks like? If you're going to suffer for the rest of your life in this, and that's the answer, but there's something on the other side of it, whatever it is, are we willing to let God? Whenever we do, we will have renewal. It's not contingent on getting the answer we want. Renewal comes from waiting on the Lord. To wait on Him is to admit that we have no other help, either in ourselves or in another. See, this is what we start to do, is we start to, I'm going to take care of it. No, I'm going to find something to take care of it. And we'll talk about, it's not about inactivity, it's not about passivity, but it is about knowing who we trust in. To wait on Him is to admit we have no other help. It's not merely killing time, but it's a life of confident expectation. Those who give up their own frantic efforts to save themselves and turn expectantly, expecting God is going to take care of this. I know that. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know He's hearing. I know He'll answer. waiting expectantly, turning expectantly, we will be able to replace or exchange the worn-out strength for new strength, the faintness for power from God. So does waiting mean doing nothing? Well, remember that waiting on the Lord is faith across time and trouble. So everything that faith means, waiting on the Lord means. Faith is about where we put our confidence and where we give our allegiance, right? This is probably its own sermon, but the idea, both in the Greek word and in the Hebrew word, both in the context, social context, and rulers and everything in the New Testament world and in the Old Testament world, the words that are used for faith described not just believing, but where do we give our loyalty? Is it to Caesar? Same word, that you would give that loyalty or allegiance to Caesar, or to Babylon, or to Egypt, or to some other god? Where is your allegiance and where is your trust? Where is your faithfulness and where are you putting your confidence? So that means that that's going to, in some cases, be active, in some cases, be still, right? You're going to, it's not like, well, God's got it, twiddle my thumbs. No, we're going to act, we're going to live the right way. We're going to be obedient to him in faith. We're going to walk with him in faith. We're going to pray to him in faith. But also, we're going to recognize I don't save myself. We're going to recognize there's only so much I can do, and there's a time when my efforts stop and I just leave it to God, and I don't fret because I can't do anything about it. I trust because I've prayed about it, because I have put my hope in the one who can and will do the best possible thing, whatever that is, about it. So we learn to be still and wait, like Moses and the people of Israel standing on the shoreline. All you need to do is be silent and stand there. I'm going to defeat the Egyptians. But we also learn to obey, like Moses with the Amalekites, as he's holding up his arms and Joshua is down defeating them, and they're all fighting because that's what the Lord said to do. This is faith. And maybe the best example, there's a couple examples, and we can talk about a lot of biblical examples of waiting on the Lord. Think of Joseph. You think of times in David's life. But right here in the book of Isaiah, we see these examples. Now, the book of Isaiah, just to break down a very simple version of it, there's the introduction in chapters 1 to 5, and then chapter 6 is Isaiah's call. And then you have in chapter 7 to 39 this big argument about the main theme of Isaiah, which is the Lord, Yahweh alone, delivers. He is the one to look to for deliverance, and so trust him. Give your allegiance to him. And then we get to this section that we're starting with, chapter 40, which goes to the end of the chapter, and this is starting to work out and help us to understand what that deliverance, what that salvation looks like, right? Well, chapter 7 to 39 starts and ends with a narrative section. In chapter 7 to 12, Isaiah deals with and interacts with the king of his time, not Ahab, Ahaz. And then in chapter 36 to 39, he ends that section with another story, another narrative about the son of Ahaz, Hezekiah. And what we find between them is a contrast. One of them waited on the Lord and the other didn't. And it shows, and it changes everything. So at the beginning, especially in 7 to 8, we see the story about Ahaz, who there was an alliance between the northern kingdom of Israel and Syria, and they're coming against him. And Isaiah says right at the beginning, this isn't much of a threat to you. It's not a big deal. Don't overreact. This is going to be, don't call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, but put trust in the Lord, and your faith will be as firm as you are. If you are not firm in your faith, he says, you are not firm at all. Ahaz. But Ahaz doesn't put his trust in the Lord, and he doesn't wait on the Lord, and you can read about his response and his reaction and what he tries to do there in chapter 7 through 12. And then we get to his son, the king Hezekiah, in chapters 36 to 39. And here, the nation of Assyria, which is the superpower of the time, is coming against Hezekiah in Judah. And Isaiah says right at the beginning, this is a big deal. This is an existential threat to Judah. And so what he does is he immediately runs to the temple and he repents and he prays to God and he calls on him for help. And God delivers. He delivers him. And then in chapters 38 and 39, another thing happens where he's told he's about to die, and he asks God to give him more life and to let him have more. And God gives him 10 more years. But you see the difference in the response. Are we running to God whenever trouble comes? Or are we running to make alliances and figure out some political scheme or figure out how to solve it for ourselves like Ahaz? What are we doing? Waiting on the Lord. And this has as much application to you in high school or in the office or at home as it does a king in the ancient Near East. This is a timeless principle of walking with God. They who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. Not might, not could renew their strength. We'll see how it goes. You will renew your strength. You will mount up with wings like eagles. You will walk and not faint. So let's close with this thought about the mounting up with wings like eagles. What a beautiful picture. Talked about this just a touch on 4th of July weekend, but wanted to really dive in to go with this section. I love eagles. They're my favorite. I love watching eagles. I mean, 7.5-foot wingspan, soaring. And there's so many pictures in the Bible of spreading out wings, of being like an eagle. Think of Psalm 55, as the psalmist is in his troubles, oh, that I had wings and I could just fly away. But I want to take us to Exodus 19. And verse 4, and this is maybe the most defining, maybe the picture that Isaiah is building on here. As Isaiah, as here, the Lord looks back to the Exodus and uses this term. He says, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you. I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself." You remember, you just watch. You just watch what God's going to do. And sometimes that's our job, is to believe and stand firm and watch what God's going to do. Sometimes we have a part to play. Sometimes that's it. But don't downplay the faith that it takes to do that. That is an act, that is the most defiant act of courage that Israel could do, that Judah could do while they're in Babylon, is to believe that God, whose temple just got smashed, whose people just got destroyed, who's being carried along, and things are being made out of their gold to worship these Babylonian gods, to believe that their God is still greater, and these are all false. To believe as they sit there that there is a greater deliverance coming. It takes some audacity to hold on to faith through that, and praise God that through the prophets and through the word that they had and through the wonders that God had shown them, they had faith to hold on to it And we received now that legacy from the remnant that held on to God. It took faith to stand and watch God deliver. But don't mistake that God did the work and how I bore you on eagle's wings. But look where he brought them. I would think it would say, and I brought you across the Red Sea. And I brought you out of captivity. But that is not what it says. It says, and I brought you to myself. That's not a location. Something bigger happened than they were slaves and now they're not. What happened was they were not a people and now they're God's people. And that's exactly what we read in 1 Peter 2, verses 9 and 10 about us. Once you were not a people, but now you are the special possession, the people of God, the holy priesthood, the holy kingdom of God. You are mine. I brought you to myself. That is God's great deliverance, is to create a covenant oneness with his people and to bless them and to care for them because you are my people and I am your God. That's the heart of what God is creating, is that connection. And in that is the deliverance from all the things we want delivered from. And in that is the blessings that we want. But ultimately what we want is for him to bring us to himself on wings like eagles. We will mount up. Noticed, I hope, the picture from going from walking to running to flying. You will soar. The one that created eagles says you are made to fly through these difficulties that you're facing when you put your hope and your trust and your confidence and your loyalty in him, walking with him in obedience. I heard a quote Adrian told me from yesterday that Amy said something like, true rest is found in peace with God. And so our theme is my heart right with God? Is your heart right with God? Do you have peace with him? Peace comes through Jesus Christ by giving your confidence and your allegiance to him and following him, being baptized into him, turning from every other way and choosing his way, to hold on to him. If you're ready to come to Jesus, we invite you to come while we stand and sing.